Hi, folks. For those of you who follow my work, you know that I've spent the last 5 years arguing that we need a wartime approach to confront the climate crisis. Turns out, however, that metaphor is not our government's strong suit. Their imagination for a wartime approach is limited to, well, war. Today, I want to talk about the maddening paradox that we could always find money for the military and yet not for the climate crisis. For years, the climate movement has been calling on the federal government to spend 2% of GDP on climate infrastructure and action. Likewise, the Climate Emergency Unit's #1 marker for genuine emergency action is to spend what it takes to win, but to no avail. Instead, total federal government spending on climate action clocks in generously at roughly $19 billion a year, or just under 0.7% of GDP. And a large chunk of that is tagged for tax credits for dubious things like carbon capture and storage, iffy investments that, if needed and wanted, the fossil fuel industry should damn well pay for itself. Tragically, if we had spent the last decade spending 2% of GDP a year, or just over $60 billion in today's dollars, on a just climate transition, we could have transformed the economy. Literally, our society would be unrecognizable in all of the ways that we aspire, and European jurisdictions would not be so embarrassingly kicking our ass when it comes to greenhouse gas reductions. And yet, with disorienting ease, our new fiscally conservative Prime Minister has announced that Canada's military spending will hit 2% of GDP this year and will reach a stratospheric 5% within 10 years, the largest increase in military spending since the Second World War, a target that will require additional spending of $50 billion to $90 billion a year, depending on how much the economy grows in that time. Like, how on earth could such decisive military spending increases be made with such nonchalance, while it remains so damn hard to extract spending commitments to confront the climate crisis? The Campaign for a Youth Climate Corps, for example, has spent the last few years relentlessly lobbying for a transformative new public program that would invite young people to mobilize in our collective defense, and we've been pressing for an initial investment of $1 billion a year. But what we've constantly heard back is that the government's fiscal constraints make an ask like that unrealistic. Yet when it comes to Donald Trump and NATO demanding that Canada up its military spending by an amount roughly 15 times larger this year alone, money is suddenly no object. The Carney government's decision to ramp up military spending will come with steep costs in other domains, not least because the government refuses to entertain tax increases, despite the fact that we are facing an unprecedented economic attack from the Trump regime. See, normally in times of war, governments raise war taxes, particularly on the wealthy, but oddly not now. As former Liberal Foreign Affairs Minister Lloyd Axworthy, who interestingly is now a sharp critic of Carney, wrote in a recent Substack post, quote, "Watch for a coming budget that slashes social programs and international aid to cover expanding military commitments, the unspoken cost of appeasement." Most maddening about the announced ramp up in military spending is how it so grossly misconstrues the real security threat. Now, I'm not a defense expert. I accept that we live in a dangerous world in which a growing list of regimes harbor expansionist and malicious intents. I suspect the most likely such threat we face is from a Trump-led USA, and no amount of military spending will protect us from that. If a southern assault is to be resisted, it's going to be by way of mass civil non-compliance. And it sure as hell means that we shouldn't be spending billions of dollars on a cockamamie Golden Dome missile defense system that leaves us locked in the house with that very same regime. But here's the thing. There is now no doubt that the gravest security and civilizational threat that we face is from the climate crisis itself, a threat multiplier at every level. And yet on that score, our political leaders are acting like a sorry bunch of surrender monkeys. And it's not just President Trump and his brutal rollbacks of climate action south of the border. Our own federal and provincial governments are pathetically walking away from their climate commitments. Our official climate plans are in a shambles and riddled with incoherence as our governments, with decisions that in the year 2025 can only be described as acts of arson, continue to approve new fossil fuel projects while abandoning carbon pricing and replacing it with nothing, and second guessing and walking back other promised climate policies. Like, the defeatism is hard to take. The solutions to the climate crisis, to mass electrifying our society, are sitting on a silver platter, waiting to be deployed at speed and scale. But instead, we've been subjected to painful incrementalism, a slow march towards decarbonization that is not only failing to bend the emissions curve at the pitch and pace required, but additionally keeps giving the fossil fuel industry time to regroup, forcing us to waste time and resources re-prosecuting fights that we've already won. Like, just witness the industry's relentless efforts to roll back municipal prohibitions on gas use in new buildings, or the auto industry's recent efforts to repeal the zero-emission vehicle mandate, or the continuous efforts of the industry to secure yet another fossil fuel pipeline or to stave off an oil and gas emissions cap. The climate movement ends up stuck in rearguard actions in this deadly version of Groundhog Day. As Anatoni, the chief executive of the forthcoming COP30 UN climate conference in Brazil, recently stated, "Climate is our biggest war. Climate is here for the next 100 years. We need to focus and not allow these other wars to take our attention away from the bigger fight that we need to have." To which I would add, it's the climate crisis that is cooking people to death in record-breaking heat domes, as happened to over 600 British Columbians in the space of 1 week 4 years ago. As The Guardian recently reported, heat kills about 20 times more people than terror attacks and about 6 times more than war and armed conflicts. It's the climate crisis that is displacing millions of people globally. It's the climate crisis that will wreak havoc with our food and water systems and upend our healthcare system. It's the climate crisis that is killing people and destroying homes with floods and hurricanes. And it's escalating climate-induced wildfires and the burning of fossil fuels that's killing millions of people a year from air pollution. So why must it be so bloody hard to spend what it takes to confront the real emergency?